Good evening. I was talked into this by my youngest offspring. She has heard this story many times, and she thought other people might want to hear it. So here goes. I read a lot of what I considered adventure stories. I'm way down at the other end of the continent. I'm in the deep south, and I leave the deep south, the Mississippi River, to come to the far north, to the Yukon River, to work in a bush hospital in Tanana, Alaska. I followed my directions to the letter from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The first joke on me was, we so used to using acronyms instead of a word, it becomes a word. I'm going to Alaska to work for the BIA and not registering what the I stood for. And the most ironic joke on me was, I married an Indian. I prefer the term indigenous people, but anyway. So here I am, following my directives from the BIA, knowing nothing about Alaska, and I have a clothing list that I am to bring with me. I'm not to bring any summer clothes. I am not to bring any other dresses but my nurses' uniforms. I land in Juneau on the 9th of July, and all I have with me is winter clothes. Thank you, government agency. Well, by the time paperwork was taken care of and I go to Tanana, where I'm to live and to work, in the middle of July, here I land at the little airfield. The flowers are blooming in profusion along the airfield, beautiful flowers, still knowing nothing about Alaska, thinking all the indigenous people were Eskimos, not knowing there were Indians here. Anyway, so the doctor there, I think she's still in Anchorage, there was a female doctor and 5 staff, all females. Well, we got a lot of visits from Galena Air Force Base, from the flyboys. For more reasons than one. I found out later that my boss, the doctor, who was only 2 years older than me, her uncle was commander of all armed forces in Alaska. No wonder those flyboys visited us. So anyway, it's July and it's August, and I'm thoroughly enamored with that river. I still love that river. And summer works out pretty well. Some of my duties, but BIA had these desk jockeys coming up because they got airfare, they got per diem to come up and look around and pretend they had business there. And so one woman, whatever her, after over 60 years, I forgot what her job was, her job title was. But she decided, there were 2 of us licensed practical nurses, well trained. She decided we were not nurses, so we couldn't do any nursing. Added to that, all of the TB patients had been sent to the newly opened Seward Sanitarium. So we had no real acute patients. All the acute patients were sent to Fairbanks at this time. You have to realize this is pre-statehood. So there's not much to do if I wasn't allowed to be a nurse. So I had assignments like go pick blueberries for the patient's pancakes tomorrow morning, make drapes for the dining room, fill out orders to Montgomery Ward catalog for the children's pajamas. This isn't nursing, and I'm frustrated. Added to that, the acting head nurse had applied for transfer. For 2 years she was waiting and had not been transferred. So she had resigned and was just biding her time. And in the meantime, one of the local boys, anyhow, a pair of hazel eyes came through on his way back to Fairbanks to work out of the Union Hall. So all of that, I resigned, and I came to Fairbanks. So I thought I was coming to Fairbanks. So I have nothing to do with walk up and down and visit with the river and the people. There was one woman in town who had a boat with a cabin on it, and she was very particular about who was taking the rides in her boat. Not very many people were invited on Maggie Elliott's boat. So I'm walking up and down, and she invited me in her boat. I didn't realize I was special. Oh yes, I jumped in, by this time it's September. Freezing rain, the wind blowing horizontally across the river, the rain turning into sleet or snow. So I get in the boat. Oh boy, I'm an adventure. That's what I came here looking for, adventure. I'm having an adventure. I'm getting in this small boat and I'm going down the river to visit people who live down the river. We had just sat down to fresh caught salmon and some fresh vegetables of some kind, cooked in a stack oven. And some of you long-time Alaskans know what that is. When here comes, now by this time it's getting dark. It's almost 9 o'clock, say 8 o'clock. But anyway, the boat stopped. A man comes running up the bank. Oh, good, the nurse is here. I'm not a nurse anymore. I resigned. We have this girl in the boat having a baby. Uh-oh. So everybody insists. So I put my parka on, and I jump, and I go down to get in the boat with him. Now, this boat is about 14 feet long. There are 2 men driving the boat, handling the boat. There's 2 12-year-old boys at the other end of the boat. And laying flat in the boat is this 15-year-old girl in her 30th hour of labor. She's laying flat, and she's covered with a water-repellent sleeping bag that zipped down flat. And at her head sat this old lady, and in 1954, to me, she was an old lady. Right, right now, I'm 40 years older than she was then. Not quite, but anyway, 30 years older than that. But anyway, and she has a pet milk carton full of homebrew bottles, drinking them one at a time, throwing the bottles into the Yukon River. It's getting dark, the northern lights are out, and she's filling this girl's head with all sorts of superstitions about the northern lights. When they move, that's Utlani, which is close as I can make that Indian word. It's bad luck, so something's gonna happen. Now this girl is, number one, she'd been left by her parents and those two boys, and somebody had rescued her and got her into the boat and got somebody in the boat. And she's uneasy, to say the least. And this old lady, oh, this is bad luck and what's going to happen. And so I said, well, the northern lights, if they move, it's bad luck. They always move. Where'd that come from? Well, I think it came out of one of those homebrew bottles. But anyway, now here I am in a boat. There's no room for me anywhere in this boat. It's loaded. The two men and the old lady in front, she's laying, and she was 5 feet, about 5 feet, 8 inches tall. She was not a small child. And these two boys at her feet. Now, for me to get into the boat, the boys had to get out. Her brother was one of the boys, and he was frightened to death. He didn't know what was happening to his sister. I was surprised by that, because on the Yukon River in 1950s, a 12-year-old boy that didn't know what having a baby was about really surprised me, because a lot of 12-year-olds were making babies. So anyway, I get in the boat. Now I'm sitting cross-legged at her feet. And we're going upriver in an overloaded boat, in the dark, in the cold, driving rain, freezing rain by this time. And so I began talking to her and making conversation and check her out what I knew about normal delivery. And when I find out how many hours she had been in labor, I was surprised she could even talk to me anymore. So pretty soon, for me to check and find out what was going on with her, I had to get down on my elbows to lift this thing she was covered with, because if I sat up, it would pull it up on the sides about 5 inches and let that cold, freezing rain in. So I couldn't do that. So I'm down on my belly on my elbows. And I'm biding time, and I'm wondering how long, and we're taking so slow to get up current to the hospital. And to this day, they are both dead. But those two men manning that boat earned my utter respect, for in the dark to know that river so well, to get us safely to the hospital with no trouble. But before we got there, she told me, something's happening. So I go down on my elbows to see what's happening. Aha! What's happening was the crown of a little head of black hair says, "Ready or not, here I come." We're still miles from the river. So here I am in this real dignified position, and into these hands was delivered over almost 10-pound baby girl. Now, I had gotten into that boat for moral support, I told myself. I did not expect anything to be any more than that. Nothing was expected from me for that. Now, here I am with a newborn baby in freezing conditions. There's nothing to wrap the baby in. And the mother has been so long in heavy labor, and she's covered with so much stuff, a feather bed and all sorts of things. She had on her normal winter underwear, men's long johns. I don't know how many, maybe 4 layers of clothing. And she was perspiring till she was wet. Well, all my self-confidence went downriver. What are we going to do now? I'm so afraid of her getting chilled because she's wet from sweating. After all, it is called labor, isn't it? And there's nothing to put on the baby. And of course, living on the river, and I was taught to cut the umbilical cord right away. Now, any of you who knows anything about nursing, we know we don't do that anymore. Anyway, so in my pocket is my trusty pocket knife. And one of the men took his shoestring out and was handing it down to me, which it didn't reach me. And I pulled the drawstring from the hood of my parka. Real sterile conditions. So that taken care of, then I am really worried. And it seemed like we were taking longer and longer and longer to get to the hospital. My concern kept going back to this baby and no clothing, not even a blanket, nothing. And she was still putting out a lot of heat. So I put the baby against her thigh and wrapped this feather bed that was underneath her around the baby to keep her warm. Where that he come from? And I held my hand with just enough to her face so that she had just enough place to breathe. Because that baby was breathing. She was yelling before her feet were out. She was ready. So we made it to the hospital. Thank God. And that was over 60 years ago. So we got to the hospital, and both mother and baby were checked out by the doctor, and everything was fine. The mother has died some years ago. The baby, the last time I saw her, she was dancing with a troop of dancers. And as far as I know, she's still mayor of the village.
Thank you very much. Good job.
God works in mysterious ways.
Yes, he does. All right.
That doesn't hurt.
Okay, I'll hold the chair. There you go. You got it? All right, thank you.